Gracias. Buenos días, madrileños y madrileñas. Estoy aquí con mi compañero Eric Stangvik, que es Senior Vice President a No Bully. Pero no hablo mucho español. Es muy fácil por mí de hablar en inglés. Before we begin, I have a question for you. Put up your hands if you recognize this photograph. So quite a few of you do. This is the Earthrise photo, which is the Earth's first ever look at itself. And it was taken on board Apollo 8 on Christmas Eve, 1968. And it represented an enormous moment and evoked huge tenderness for this fragile planet that we call home. There are moments like these where humanity experiences an enormous leap of consciousness. And it happened with the birth of printing that marked the end of the Middle Ages. And it happened again with these photos that the astronauts sent back to Earth, representing these first pictures of what the Earth actually looks like. And it happened again with the invention of the internet, which took place exactly 50 years ago in October 1969. And the founders of the internet sense the importance of this moment. And they framed this moment with the potential of a world forged with connectivity, and that the internet will be a force for super-democracy beyond any one nation state, and a place where each of us could express ourselves. Fast forward 50 years. This is the moment that Steve Jobs walked on stage to announce the world's first iPhone. By this moment in 2007, nearly everyone had some access to the internet, at least in more developed countries. Microsoft had released the first tablet in the year 2000. And by that time, most of us were spending quite a few hours a day online. And much of what the founders of the internet promised has happened. We can connect with almost anyone around the world. And we have access to knowledge that only kings and their advisors had in days of old. But what the founders of the internet had not calculated for was this. Just as much as we are creative and compassionate beings, we also have a darker side that can tend towards selfishness and aggression. And for those of us who work in the internet space, trying to make it a better place for children, we were hearing alarming stories of things going wrong. I want to talk in particular today about cyberbullying, online bullying, because it is a phenomenon that's on the rise. Let me be clear about this. Many of the children who are the target of online bullying are also the target of old-style face-to-face physical and verbal bullying in the daytime. But the problem about online bullying is that it amplifies and increases the harm. Here's the thing, if I can't see the whites of your eyes, my capacity for empathy tends to fade to zero. And once a story or a posting goes online, it becomes a reality TV show of its own and attracts a huge following. And then it's very hard to remove. It was because of this concern that 3 years ago, I started to travel the world, and I spoke to the big companies. I went to Facebook in Menlo Park. I went to YouTube in San Francisco. I went to UNESCO in Paris. And I posed this question: how do we solve for this? How do we make sure that the internet is a good place for children so they can be safe and successful when they go online? And out of those meetings, we decided to convene 25 thought leaders to London to solve for this question. How do we make the internet a better place for children? And as we looked at the internet and we looked at what was being done for children, we came to this realization. Children are online practically from birth. But no one is really giving them the skills and the values that they need for a connected world. So you might be thinking, why does that matter? We use this phrase digital natives a lot. And by that, people mean that this generation seems to be so easy online that they don't need much instruction. If you throw a child a tablet or a smartphone, it seems like they're pretty much capable of hacking into the Pentagon. But here's the problem. We have a generation growing up sorely unequipped to deal with the fake news and the deception that they experience from an early age. They don't know how to deal with the culture of hate and meanness that they see on YouTube and that they see in gaming sites. And they don't know what to do when they are the target of online bullying or their friends are the target of online bullying or hate. So from that meeting in London, we launched a campaign. And the campaign is called Power of Zero. And you may be wondering, why Power of Zero? Why power? Because really, we're teaching a generation to use their power well. And if we look at the great exemplars of power, like Nelson Mandela, what we see is there's a commitment from them to use power with zero violence, zero hate, and zero bullying. And that gave birth to this campaign. But the other insight that we arrived at in London was that we had to make sure that children were equipped with the broad set of skills and values that they need for their online, offline worlds. It doesn't make sense to talk just about their online worlds as if that was a separate thing. That's not the reality of their lives. They flow seamlessly from the online to the offline space and back again. So as we spoke to experts around the world, they said, no, you need to be focusing on the broad set of life skills, sometimes called social and emotional skills, that children will need across all domains. And with that foundational set of skills, they're then equipped to deal both with the problems of the internet, but they're also equipped to be creative online and to learn how to connect online and to harness the potential of the internet for good. And that gave birth to this set of 12 skills, which is what we call the power wheel. And what you see here is skills that range from very technical skills like digital power and connection to things that are going to help them deal with fake news and deception, critical thinking, for instance. But in this mix, they also need to learn some very core life skills. Many psychologists say that emotional regulation, the ability to manage your feelings, to recognize what you're feeling, to modulate your emotions when you are upset, is the most important skill of childhood. And if you can get that right, you can deal with the challenges of the internet. And the internet poses a special problem because what happens when children go online is that often it is emotionally dysregulating. Does that make sense? In other words, it starts to trigger you, it starts to activate you. You're less able to manage your feelings and your reactivity. So these were skills which children needed to learn for decades, but we've updated them for this new digital age. And as we looked at this, we spoke to experts from around the world, and I remember particularly speaking to Stefan Choudron, who's an amazingly generous researcher. She's the European Union's main researcher into what's happening with children under 8 and technology. And what she was saying was essentially what monkey sees, monkey does. In other words, unless there's guidance to children about how they are online, they pick up and they copy the behaviors that they see online. And those aren't good behaviors. I think we can all agree on that. And she also made the point that unless children have a working concept for what the internet is, which is a kind of profound question, they don't really get that there's a real person at the other end of your screen, that what you do online actually affects the feelings of others. In other words, they don't actually get how empathy, which is the ability to step into someone else's shoes, translates into the online space. So how do we do this? How do we actually make sure that children get these skills? What we're doing with Power Zero is launching a global campaign. And that global campaign is trying to reach children across multiple platforms. And we're going to start with basic lessons for young teachers, children 4 through 8, teaching those skills that you saw on the Power Wheel. 24 lessons is a lot, but you need to have sufficient dosage. It's like taking a metaphor from the medical world. They need to have sufficient exposure to get it. And in that area, we're working with Nathan, which is a very well-respected French publisher that specializes in educational materials for children. They also need to have exposure to videos that tell the story in a captivating way. So we're creating animated characters with a US-based video developer called Fablevision. We're creating storybooks. We want to update stories for a digital world. I don't know if in España you have the story of Little Red Riding Hood. Do you have that? Okay, people are nodding. Okay. So Little Red Riding Hood is a story about a child being deceived by a wolf. So you can see fairly rapidly how that translates into the online space, because there are plenty of wolves online wanting to deceive. And what Little Red Riding Hood missed was a sense of trusting her own intuition, so that when she goes into Grandma's house, the story says Little Red Riding Hood sensed that something was very wrong. Do you remember that? Little Red Riding Hood realized that there was a problem, but she didn't have the trust in her intuition to then stop and protect herself. And it's that intuition that we're wanting to build in children. We're also creating an online game, and the online game is going to be using a much-loved character called Mina that was created by our friends at UNICEF, who's a spirited 9-year-old girl that you can see on the left-hand side over there. And she's going to be telling, through the game, the lessons of Para Zero. In parallel with this, we want to do a strong campaign focused on parents. In each country that we go to, it's going to be so important to get parents on board with some of the sorts of videos that you've been seeing earlier in the presentation. And you can see the potential of this as you start to launch provocative questions like, ¿Qué es Internet? Because most children, and honestly, a lot of adults would probably struggle with the answer to that. This is a collaborative campaign. The only way to change huge systems is to bring in others to join with you that have significant influence. As you can see here, we have some significant partners. But we're looking for more. We're looking for the communications partners that want to help join us and help spread the message around the importance of teaching children these skills and values. You would not send a child out onto the motorway on their bicycle without at least, or even the main roads. And you certainly wouldn't do that with no training. But we're sending out our children onto the highways of the internet without any real training about how to be wise and to protect themselves. And we're also looking for partners here in Spain as we join forces to bring this campaign to this country and to the children here. We've already got established partners in the United Kingdom. UNESCO, we're partnering with, is based in Paris. If you are interested in joining us, I would love to talk to you. I'm going to be here for most of the day, and my companion Eric Steinvik is also here. Together, we can make the internet a better place for our children. Thank you.